My name is Karan Singh.
My name is Estella Perez.
My name is Selina Ma.
My name is Marina Byezhanova.
Eugene, Geylik.
My name is Hinkson.
My name is Anna Krivitsky.
The names go. Kakim go.
Hello, this is the fourth episode of ELAN's Waves of Change project about identity and belonging in the English-speaking communities of Quebec. The people you are going to meet here arrived in Quebec after the second referendum, during a period of new beginnings following decades of political friction and economic stagnation. They'll be talking about how they negotiated a place for themselves in the evolving social contract, where they feel they belong and where they don't, and how they feel about being English speakers living in Quebec today. Let's hear what they have to say.
Barbados is very small, so to be able to work in what I wanted to do, study what I wanted to do. So I went to France, but first of all to do my master's, but then always with the objective that perhaps I'd move to Quebec, which I did do, and I liked the fact that you could come here as a permanent resident. So, build on your experience, your education, so not really start from scratch again, but come as a legal economic immigrant.
Before I came to Canada, I went to England for my master's. And I think that opened my mind to see, there are different cultures, different mentalities, different way of living. So I was planning to stay a little bit longer, but it was hard to actually settle in England. And then I started looking. And that's the reason, I found, all the immigration program Canada is offering is very interesting.
Typical South Asian stories. So middle-class South Asians, once we're done with school, we start looking for education opportunities abroad. I started looking at the UK, the US, and Canada. And I actually came to go to McGill as well.
As we were planning initially to go to Toronto, and I was sent for a quick visit here, and for some reason Quebec felt warmer to me. And my mom gave me the choice since I didn't want to leave Israel, so I could choose where we would be heading. And that's how Montreal was selected.
I came to Quebec pursuing pleasure. I fell in love with Montreal because of the jazz, because of the arts and cultural scene, and frankly, because of the bonus kisses.
Originally, I started in Vancouver on a part-time basis with Air Canada. However, when there was a position open as an engineer, I had to move because the position was in Montreal.
My dad tried to start a business back at home. It was fairly impossible at the time, 90s in Ukraine. There was a lot of corruption. They didn't feel that there was a future for me growing up.
So at the time, things were getting very serious up there in Mexico. There was a lot of violence and limited opportunities to make a living. So we heard this about Canada, specifically in Quebec, that it was a peaceful area, a multicultural place to live in. So part of the charm was that this was a French-speaking province. So we took the opportunity, we applied, and we were lucky to be accepted.
My former roommate from when I was living in Grenoble is actually a Canadian from Newfoundland, and her husband is from Quebec. And even though they weren't living here, they had a whole network of friends here in Montreal. And every weekend when they'd come here, they'd invite me. And that's, in fact, how I met my husband, even a few weeks after arriving here. So I was lucky.
The government provided us with paid French lessons. So thanks to that, we were able also to meet other immigrants who also became our friends and were supportive of us. And afterwards, well, people you meet at work, neighbors, and immigrants in general who came around the same time as we did.
I find the support from Canada, Quebec in general is quite impressive. After I got accepted, I got a booklet, as a newcomer, what you need to do when you arrive. So I read that booklet thoroughly So when I arrived here, I approached different organizations to get support for languages, also finding jobs. Also, I think the Chinese community in Quebec, it helps a lot. They offer a lot of programs for newcomers.
Oh, it took a while for it to feel like home. It was really hard. We came in 1998, which means that we didn't really have internet yet back at home, so we couldn't research and prepare and find and build that support system as people who immigrate now do. So when we came, we felt quite lost. We had some relatives of relatives of relatives that showed us around, but that was it. So everything was confusing, everything was new, everything was daunting. It was quite hard.
When I moved to Montreal, I'd already moved and lived around Canada and also in Mexico. And so it was like a second immigration. I also came as an artist and also as an unskilled worker with zero experience in the professional area. So I couldn't avail myself of any real government services. I wasn't in school, so I wasn't able to find the support there. So I was really on my own, winging it, doing really what they call bum jobs, working in factories.
How strongly does Montreal feel like home to you?
I knew that French was the official language here, and somehow there was a separation between the two Canadas. But throughout the years, I've been learning more of it and living some of the climate throughout my children's books and the friends of my children who are francophones.
I knew just the fact that it's a bilingual country, right? So I didn't know the details of the history and in terms of the two referendums, just kind of cursory knowledge. But my impression was I come from a multilingual country, so I was super ignorant because I thought, how hard could it be? How hard could it be for two languages to coexist? I come from a country which has more than 20 languages, so for me it was not that difficult to imagine.
Coming from the USSR, 15 republics, over 140 languages, we've been immersed into different cultures since I was a kid. So to me, I understand there is certain semantics about, and people get emotional about who says what.
At the beginning, there was not much involvement. Like, I didn't feel too involved in that. I've heard that there were a year when many businesses shifted to Ontario for a separation reason that never happened.
Well, I think I was fairly prepared because I studied in Vancouver in high school in the early 90s. I was familiar with the FLQ crisis, to some extent the silent revolution, and also the referendum, and also Oka was something that was very big on our map and something that really, I believe, marked our generation. And so when I moved to Montreal, I knew that I was walking into a hotbed.
Arriving here, I knew absolutely nothing about it. But my first semester in CEGEP, first class I was taking Italian. I was in the languages program. Our teacher said, everybody take out sheets of paper and pen. We're going to have a quiz. We said, quiz, first class, why are we having a quiz? And he said, the question is, what do you think of Bill 101? And everybody started writing, and I raised my hand and I said, I'm not sure what you're talking about. And you don't know what Bill 101 is. And he seemed to have taken it personally.
Before I arrived here, I know there was a long, complicated history between the Anglophone and Francophone in Quebec. But in my mind, I thought it was in the past. It's in the history. So I wasn't aware before arriving that they're still existing for political, social, there's still some conflict existing in Quebec. So for me, that was a shock to realize that, okay, it's not really in complete harmony in this place.
How strongly do you feel you belong in Quebec?
think I'm very cognizant that the people who are kind of s'accrocher in their culture, right? I guess if you want to call them the Pure Land, I'm not oblivious to the fear. I think there is a fear that the culture will be lost if the language is lost. And I think anybody who comes from a small language and left that language, like my language that was spoken in my little village, is not spoken anymore.
I do have an incredible amount of empathy and compassion for those who want to preserve the language and for the French speakers who are afraid that they will lose their culture. I absolutely understand that. I come from Ukraine. Our language was suppressed. It was prohibited. You were made to feel as a peasant if you were speaking your mother tongue. A lot of things were done. So I understand. I have a lot of appreciation. But I think that there are better approaches to not killing the love for the language that most of us immigrants have when we arrive.
Loved French. I studied it. I lived and worked in it in France for 4.5 years arriving here. So I have a lot of friends who are francophones. I have conversations in French. My family, my home life is in French mainly, but since my son's born, it's mainly English because I wanted to make sure he could speak my language and communicate with my family.
Language is a tool. As many tools you have in your back pocket, the better, right? So I didn't have any issues to send my son to a French school. Well, we started in Vancouver, like I said before. So he started in English, and he is perfectly trilingual or fourlingual, so he's got a lot of tools.
I'm a mother for 2 girls, and I will have more information to share about my older one because she's almost 14. And actually, she started in class d'accueil in a public French school. I had no problem with that once or all because I wanted her to learn more languages. She today speaks more languages than I do, which is fantastic, I find. I was very sad to find out that she was actually bullied by a teacher in a maternelle, a teacher, for being a child who did not speak French and not good enough to participate and had to leave to class d'accueil.
When my daughter was in daycare and was started thinking of the school to send her to, and was it going to be English or French, that's when I found out that really she couldn't go to an English public school. So for me, it was, I would say, in major part, more of an ideological decision. I sent her to an English private school because a private school you're allowed, and she was able to receive her certificate of eligibility. She, at home we speak Spanish, English, and she speaks Russian with my parents. So French was completely at school, but she somehow got herself into Français accéléré, and apparently she's pretty fluent in French.
Our strategy has been to send both our kids to public school, then continue in private school in French so they can perfect the French language and also have the opportunity to get good at other languages such as English and Spanish. And while being at French schools, to respect the authorities because they sometimes get reminded to just speak in French. We told them to respect that, but if other classmates tell them to just speak in French, well, just say, I respect you, so I'm allowed to speak in whatever language I want while being at recess. So that's it, just to be respectful and perfect the French.
My husband grew up here, so he's a French Canadian. And since I'm an immigrant and non-Anglophone background, so I don't have a choice. In our family, when I realized we don't have a choice, we just have to work with the system. I have no problem sending my kids to French school because I think it is harder to learn French compared to English. And I think it's good for them to be in an environment that they can learn French. But I do believe English is very, very important in nowadays life for everybody. So I don't want them to, because the problem is in public French school, they only allowed you to speak French, no English. So what we do at our home is we speak English at home. And so we keep her English, advancing while she's learning French in school.
As an immigrant and with a Francophone husband, then yes, our son was in French public school, started French. But from birth, I've always read to him in English. I must say that as an English-speaking parent, I was quite upset when his high school sent a questionnaire, did not ask me what was my language, didn't ask if my son was bilingual. Their questions on whether my son should have access to enriched English at high school were whether he had done immersion in grade 5 and grade 6. My son has been immersed from birth in English, and I had to write a note to justify that my son gets enriched English at high school. So I wrote them, I've been calling them, I've been telling them it's unacceptable that my son not do enriched English when how he's going to be bored. So I mean, I found that a challenge that how could you not assume that maybe a child has an English speaking parent and wants access to a better level of English?
My ex and I, we sent our daughter to a international French school, a French language school called Collège International de France. And my daughter is what you could call a lifer. She's been there from maternelle all the way up to lycée. She followed the French system. In the school, it was fairly strict. You were not allowed to speak other languages aside from French, even during breaks, which is great because during the breaks they would speak English. My daughter was very shy about speaking English until I think the equivalent of grade 8. At that time, she did 1 year of intensive English, and she completely changed from being more unilingual to being a bilingual speaker. So much so that now she is trilingual. She speaks English, French, and Italian.
And how strongly do you feel you belong in Canada?
And I think my pivotal moment came when I took on Canadian citizenship, because to me, I questioned myself. First of all, I had a huge problem with taking the oath to the Queen, because I'm like, well, I come from a colony and we fought against the monarchy, and now I'm going to take the oath to the Queen. So there was that philosophical dilemma, which I find is so absurd. But anyways, then the whole idea, what would be my identity, my hyphenated identity? Would I be Canadian Indian? Would I be Indian Canadian? Would I just be Canadian? Would I be a Quebecois?
It's quite incredible living here in Quebec. The amount of people who will say to me, "Oh, you're so lucky that you're of color, because there's all these programs for you. They want to hire. The government wants to hire. You've got it made." And these same people actually wouldn't hire you. And similar to your experience, when I first moved to Montreal, I would apply for jobs in French, send out my French CV, go to job interviews in French. And the replies would often be, well, you speak French very well, but you have an accent. And je pense qu'il faudrait qu'on engage quelqu'un d'ici. We need someone from here that people can understand. So people can talk about language, but really the communication ain't happening. Well, I got 474 job applications and close to 60 job interviews to land my last permanent job, which I've since lost due to COVID.
I've never been hired by a French Quebecois company, although I've been hired into French teams, but always in English, even though I came from France. But somehow, I don't know, maybe my name, I don't know why, but I've never been hired by a French company.
Interestingly, when I went back to Ukraine to visit after graduating university, I felt that I didn't belong there at all. So all of a sudden, I felt I had a bigger culture shock going there than I had here. And then I felt, oh my God, I don't belong anywhere. So really now, as an adult who is successful and has her own business and has built an incredible community that's extremely supportive, now I belong. I've never called myself a Quebecer. I only thought of this now as we're having this discussion. I don't know why. I say that I'm Canadian. I say that I'm from Canada. Inevitably now, I also always mention that I'm an immigrant, and I didn't for so many years. I would hide it. Now I own T-shirts that say immigrant. I own mugs. My headshots on all of my social media say immigrant on them as well.
I love Marina's immigrant T-shirts because I think a lot of us as immigrants, I identify. I see things that Marina says. I see things other immigrants say, and we have made a choice to come here. We're courageous people.
I think at the heart of the debate within Quebec, when it talks about identity and language, has to be the lack of reconciliation with Quebec's history. I think there are attempts made in English Canada to recognize the genocide that has happened on this land. In Quebec, there's a complete absence of that discussion. And I think that, to me, is the most important piece of discussion whenever we talk about identity, right? We don't talk about Indigenous rights. We don't talk about Indigenous languages. We don't even talk about, when we talk about separation of Quebec, if a referendum has to happen, can Nunavik, that's the 60%, 70% of landmass of the Quebec province, will that have a choice to separate from Quebec, the nation of Quebec? And that's never discussed. People in more than 200 reserves in Canada live without drinking water. There's trucks of water, camions that bring drinking water to those reserves to give access to drinking water. And this is Canada in 2021, right?
I really like what you just said about Indigenous rights, and coming from a former colony which became independent myself, Barbados, it's true that sometimes you just do think about the fact that, you know, this is an old colonial war, and it can be hard. I'm pulled in both ways. I'm an Anglophone. I have loads of Anglophone friends and Anglophone Quebecers, and also I'm, you know, I know a lot of sovereigntists I'm close to in my, you know, in my family, etc. So I see both sides of the debate. I see the frustration, the lack of understanding.
If we're talking about the French community or the Anglophone and Francophone, I think if we're still having issues now between these two, like, how to say, group, I found it's kind of like a little bit sad because, you know, there's so many immigrants here or from different regions, different background came and contributed in this country.
It's like a party or a dinner, right? When you're in a family, whether you like each other or not, you're at the dinner table and things happen there. But if you're on the outside, you can never sit at the dinner table. So my policy for the last couple of years is really to come uninvited to the table, you know, knock on the door, crash the door down, crash the party, but always make sure that I bring something, right? Like any family or any meal, you've got to bring something that you can contribute, that you can use to enrich that experience. So whether they like me or not, I would rather be there at the table so they can hate me and tell me to my face, or tell me your food stinks, or I love your food, so that at least being there, I can belong to something. And so in that sense, I now can say that I really feel I belong to Montreal, and Montreal belongs to me.
The immigrants we interviewed for episode 4 of Waves of Change, those who arrived after 1995, have a stronger sense of belonging than any of the waves of immigration that arrived earlier. This is counterintuitive. Why would people who have only been here a few decades feel a stronger sense of belonging than families that have lived here several generations or centuries? Part of the reason is that this wave of immigration did not experience the language conflicts that earlier immigrants endured. They understand that Quebec is a French-speaking island in an English-speaking ocean, and the French language needs to be protected. Most allophones and English speakers not born in Canada comply with obligations to have their children educated in French. This has been difficult for the parents who can't help their children with homework, but learning French is a smart thing to do for anyone who plans to stay in Quebec and wants their children to stay here. The 2011 census data shows that 95% of Quebecers can understand French. This is a long way from Anglo-dominated Quebec prior to the Quiet Revolution. Quebecers have become extremely bilingual, and one of the characteristic features of bilingual communities is to hear people switch back and forth between languages. It is common to hear people speak English in Rosemont now and on the plateau. I am frequently surprised by how often I hear people speak English in Outremont, but this should not be surprising. Outremont is the most bilingual borough in Montreal, so we should expect to hear people switch back and forth between languages. The increased use of English in public has triggered old fears about Quebec ceasing to speak French. And of course, the most threatening foreign language is English. It is the international language of business, tourism, and higher education. English language music, film, books, and magazines dominate local cultures to a degree that is problematic for countries as large as Germany. But those threats are external. If every single English speaker were to leave Quebec today, all those external threats would still be there tomorrow. Are bilingual Quebecers a threat, or are they an asset? Are people who switch into English during a conversation some kind of Trojan horse for total assimilation? Another source of fear in recent years is the number of people on the island of Montreal who do not have French as their mother tongue. To which Anglos and allophones reply, so what? Isn't it more important to know if we can speak French and how well we can speak it? Anglophones and allophones can learn French, but they cannot change their mother tongue. And they wonder why mother tongue has become an issue. It creates two kinds of Quebecers. One is a private club that only certain people are born into. The other group can never join that private club, no matter how hard they try to learn French and make a positive contribution to Quebec. This fourth wave of immigration is confident enough to assert itself, to crash the party, because Quebec is home to many immigrants who believe it is their turn to be heard. St. Lawrence Boulevard, from Chinatown up to Little Italy, was once the place to find exotic restaurants and grocery stores. Diversity can now be found all around Montreal and in many parts of Quebec. This adds to the traditional charm of combining the best of North American technology with old European joie de vivre. In the next episode of Waves of Change, we will meet people who have chosen to immigrate to Quebec since 2010. These very recent immigrants have their own thoughts about why they chose to make their home here and what Quebec needs to do to make them stay. I hope you will join us for episode 5 of Waves of Change.